note went back.
Okay.
All right. So you're going to notice that my notes got erased a little bit. They were not making sense to me. And that's why I'm like, we got to just stop. The reason why is because I was missing a page. And I knew I was missing a page. And pull out a line here. Okay. So I said leaning a Cessna 150. And then I'm like, wow, nothing makes sense after that. So let's back up and go to what does make sense now. And that is what it says in the pilot's operating handbook of the Cessna manual. And I'm going to put it in quotes so you know that it's correct. It simply says, pull the mixture.
I'll fact check it.
You do that. Pull the mixture control out until the engine RPM peaks and begins to fall off. All right, so we went up to peak. And then J-Rod, what did you do? Maybe Janet, you joined us a little late. I made an error and I wanted to back up a little bit because my pages were out of order. And that's why I was kind of stumbling because nothing was making sense to me because it wasn't supposed to make sense. Begins to fall off. Then enrichen slightly.
And beyond to fall off and then enrich slightly.
Enrichen slightly back to peak RPM. Right, Stephen?
Yep.
Yeah, I remember when you showed that page, it's saying that.
Okay, so yeah, that's exactly. So why is it not reference anything about EGT?
Because it's irrelevant.
It doesn't matter.
Because Cessna 150s don't have EGT gauges.
Wow.
Unless you're like you and put them in.
Yes, unless you put them in, and then people make fun of me for having an over-gauged Cessna 150.
Why don't they put them in?
No need.
Cost, weight, room. It's a trainer. I don't think that they assume that you're going to go much over 5,000. It also says in there that don't even bother if you're not at 5,000 feet.
Huh.
So, all right. So that's a very simple little aircraft right there. So let's look at something a little bit different. How about leaning? And we do happen to have an expert.
747.
A Cessna 182. And the one I looked up has a TCM 0470. Well, most of them do. TCM 0470. All right. So what does Cessna say? Well, now we're getting into an aircraft that actually has an EGT gauge. So it says at 75% power. And where am I going to find out what 75% power is?
The POH.
Okay, in the POH. Lean to peak. EGT. And then richen by 50 degrees. All right, so I'm going to start pulling out the red knob, pull it slowly, 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 and I'm going to watch the EGT gauge rise, 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 and it's going to get to a point where it's going to start falling back down the more I pull the mixture out. Now, what I'm doing at that point, I'm going lean of peak. So it says pull it until it hits the peak, and then so I'm going to look at it and go, oh, it just peaked right at this one spot. And now I'm going to push the red knob back in until it goes 50 degrees richer. Pull this up, this over. Hey, Carb Monkey. Okay, so again, I'm going to watch it, and it's going to go, it'd be running over here somewhere. And I'm going to start pulling the red knob out, and the needle's going to get, this white needle's going to go up, up, up. It's going to peak. And if I keep pulling it out, it's going to go down. That's lean of peak. So I'm going to push it back in until it comes to here. Then I'm going to push it back in, and it's going to go cooler anyway. So you can cool it lean of peak. You can cool it rich of peak. So they want it to run 50 degrees rich of peak. This is a
Wait, hey, Kevin.
Yeah.
So just a recap, stupid question. So you're leaning it to get that 12 to 1, right?
I'm hesitant to say, but sure, yeah.
But you're leading it to get to maintain 75% power.
No, you're setting your settings, and this is where it's complicated. You're setting your RPM gauge where 75% power is, but because the chart tells you what 75% power is. And
Okay.
Is that helping keeping you out of the detonation box?
no, you're actually risking putting it in there. All right, so let's get another way. What if I didn't do this? So what if I just said I'm not going to touch the red knob? And I know many pilots who've been taught that, especially in 150s. Don't touch it, especially below 5,000. Don't ever touch it. You can burn an exhaust valve. So they just fly everywhere they go at full rich. And so let's say I'm that kind of guy. So I've got my 150 and I'm like, I'm not touching the red knob. It's dangerous. If I pull it too far, the engine quits. So I'm not doing that. So I fly it around and I go way up at altitude and I'm getting up 7,000 feet and I see 7,000 feet and I look in the EOH and I says, well, at 7,000 feet, I should be wide open throttle. So I take the black knob and I shove it all the way in. All right. So now I'm flying around by the POH. I got my hot max RPM. And according to that, I'm at 100% power, but I choose not to lean it. So what am I going to get? I'm going to get an overly rich mixture, which is going to waste fuel. And it is going to
Not perform as well?
Well, I'm going to get to that one, the number 3. And number 2, so I'm going to waste fuel. I'm going to get more lead deposits in the engine because of all the fuel going there. I don't need it. I could foul out. I get lead fouling in my plugs. Although they do okay. It's probably not going to happen because you're at a high temp and it's going to burn off all that lead we talked about. But I'm really losing power. I'm really not getting, even though I've got my settings on my gauges, my RPM, wide open throttle, I'm not getting the maximum power out of wide open throttle. It's just wide open. And maybe it's running at 2,500 RPM or 2,400. But if I could lean it, I'm actually going to see my RPM go up and regain more power. So I know it's hard to say, well, I say 75% power, but it really isn't. It's where you've set the throttle to get 75% power, but you're not getting it because you're so rich. So, okay, 25% power, lean to peak EGT, enriching by 50. This is actually, I'm going to make this red. I know that that's a test question on my side. So I'll put it in quotes. Operation. Oh, it's not quotes, not this one. So operation at peak EGT is only authorized at 65% power or less. What do you suppose that is?
Then you start getting into the detonation zone.
You got it, the red box. It's exactly it. You are in the red box. You're in the detonation zone. So don't do that. So OP. So this is in quotes. Operation on the lean side of peak EGT is not authorized. And I got that from the 182 Quebec POH dated 10/1978. All right, now let's look at a Lycoming. All right, so we got 2 Cessnas, one with an EGT, one without. So leaning.
I just checked my POH, Kevin, and it says exactly what you said about operating on the lean side of peak EGT is not approved.
And I was thinking about asking you, do you fly lean of peak?
No, I usually fly rich of peak, and it's kind of the same thing that you say when you find that peak spot and I go 2 tick marks to the left.
Yeah. Delta. This is for a normally aspirated engine. Normally aspirated. I can't get into too much. All right. So this one has I like this one because it's a little different. So best power mixture. All right. So remember, best power mixture is go fast. I'm going to get the most power out of the settings that I have set in my aircraft. So lean until tack. Fixed. That's for fixed pitch. Or airspeed. And that would be if you have a constant speed. Speed prop. Because remember, your RPM isn't going to change if you got a constant speed prop. That's what the prop's job and the governor to do, is to hold it at a constant speed. So lean until your tack, if you have a fixed pitch, or the airspeed indicator for a constant speed, peak. So let's say we're flying around like a Cessna 152, which has a Lycoming, which would match this. So it has a fixed pitch. I'm just going to pull out that little red knob very, very slowly until I see RPM peak out, and I'm done. There's best power. And that should make sense to you, because that's the RPM went up. That's where the most power is. So that happens to be about 100 degrees rich of peak, according to what I've read, just so you know. All right. So there's best power. What if I want best economy? Okay. Lean until engine runs rough. And then increase mix until smooth. Have we seen this already? Where have we seen this statement? Lean until the engine runs rough, then increase to smooth. I will help you.
Said it yesterday.
I said it a few minutes ago. Leaning a Cessna 150. Pull the mixture control out until the engine RPM peaks and begins to fall off. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that. And it reaches slightly back to peak. The engine falls off because it runs a little rough. So, all right, so there's our best economy. This happens to be about peak EGT. Trying to decide how deep I want to go, because I can go really deep. I think that might actually work for us right there.
So does this have to do with so the operation on the lean side of peak EGT is not authorized? That's for a continental, right?
Well, have you seen anywhere on here that's lean of peak? So no. Continental said operation on the lean side of peak is not authorized. So far, we have not seen anything lean of peak. I've got 100 degrees rich of peak. I've got peak.
Okay, my bad.
And I've got 50 degrees. So I got 50, peak, and 100. That's all I've got so far.
But if you run at your peak EGT, wouldn't that be bad for detonation?
Well, we're going to look at that in a minute. I was trying to decide if I want to go to this next one. This one talks about leaning a Lycoming. This is from the operator manual for an 0360. Maintain mixture in full rich position for takeoff, climb. Exception is for, yeah, let's do that. What the heck? So leaning a Lycoming from operator's manual. Operator's manual. That's where I got this one from. So maintain mix in full rich. What is full rich position?
Fully in.
All the way in. So you're going to push that red knob all the way in, full rich for takeoff. For takeoff, climb, and maximum cruise power, and max cruise power. All right, and that is above 75%. So we're going to, Lycoming wants you to leave it full rich if you're going to take off, if you're going to climb, and max cruise power, or in other words, anything over 75% power. There is an exception. So EXCPTI. Exception is lean for power, lean for power at high altitude airports. Lean for power at high altitude airport. And they're talking about takeoff. So if I was taking off from Tahoe or something like that, I would want to pull the mixture back just enough to see a peak out of it, or to regain power. Otherwise, you're too rich when you take off and you're really losing power. All right, so max cruise. Max cruise, that's at about approximately 75% power. They say never lean beyond 150 degrees rich of peak. That's routed, unless the manual says, unless the specific manual would say otherwise. All right, so best economy. Best economy is at 75%. At 75% is peak EGT. Okay, so we've got that, and then this. So now you're seeing what I wrote before. So the SSP 700 manual for Lycoming suggests 50 degrees rich of peak. Let me see. All right. Now I want to show you this. And I tell you all of that because I want you to understand something. So if we look at what we have here, this is a chart that right out of the Lycoming operator's manual. So it's not like I'm finding a chart from one space and wording from another. This is actually the words and everything right from Lycoming themselves. And I did not want to do that. Go back. Thank you. And so if we look at this, pen out, pen. All right, I put the red marks on here and the wording. This gray range right here is the best economy range. And this gray over here is the max power range. So they give you a range. It's not like it's just boom right there. But if we really think about it, we have a line right here in the middle. And so that's the max power range. And we can look down here and say, okay, this is max power. And remember what we called this right here? On this side, that was lean best power and rich best power.
Rich best power.
Okay. And remember, whenever we talk about this rich of peak and lean of peak, we're always referencing exhaust gas temperatures. So let's take a look at, pull up some of my notes so I can see it at the same time. So we can go back to our little Cessna 150. And so it said, Cessna 150, pull the mixture out until the engine RPM peaks and begins to fall off and richen slightly back to peak. Doesn't tell me where I am. Okay, Cessna 182, peak EGT and richen by 50. So they want you to run at 50 degrees rich of peak, which is, like I wrote down, where a lot of people say you should. So where is 50 degrees rich of peak going to put me? Well, it's going to put me right here. What has happened to my cylinder head temp at that spot?
Hot.
I am running near my max cylinder head temperature. Now, we need to tie something together that you guys know, but maybe aren't thinking about. All of this has to do with not burning exhaust valves. That's really, as a pilot and mechanic, that is my #1 concern, is burning up an exhaust valve. And if we think about what cools the exhaust valve, a small percentage, it's got to be We need the
Airflow, right?
being generated to find its way side of the cylinder to the cooling fin. So the only place the exhaust valve touches is the exhaust valve seat and the exhaust valve stem. And every time the exhaust valve is open, it's not even touching the seat. Oops, trying to get over here to do something. It's always Steven that makes the noise, I swear. Steven?
No, I think this time it's Hector.
Oh,
Yeah, it's Hector.
there we go. Well, I saw green on. So, okay. So where I'm going with this here. Okay. So we have to cool the exhaust valve. The hotter the cylinder is, the less heat transfer is going to happen between the exhaust seat and the exhaust guide. And I'm sure you can think about that. If the cylinder is almost the same temperature as the valve, then there's really going to be very little heat transfer. If the cylinder is really cool, then it's going to want to absorb more heat from that exhaust valve. All right. So yes, the exhaust valve temp is cool, but my cylinder head temp is really getting up there, which means that I'm not really cooling that exhaust valve. It's got nowhere for that heat to go. So that's bad. Plus it's causing stress on the cylinder. So 50 degrees richer peak, probably not the best idea. All right. So let's look. So let's see. Best power mixture, like Cummings said, best power mixture, about 100 degrees rich of peak. All right. So 100 degrees rich of peak. So that's going to go this way. So this is 50 degrees. I don't think I have the numbers here, but rich of peak is way over here. So was that best? Yeah, best power. So right in here, 50. So how is that looking really as far as the cylinder temps and exhaust gas temps go? In my opinion, I think that looks pretty good. So 100 degrees rich of peak, I like that. Okay. Let's see, best economy, lean until the engine runs, increase mixture until smooth, peak EGT. Do I want to fly around at peak exhaust gas temp?
No.
Well,
No.
for a lot of reasons, I want to say no, because number one, that's where the exhaust valve is the hottest, and that's horrible on it. Cylinder head temp, it's still pretty much up there. All right, so that's not good. So yeah, not the best. Actually, that's 50 degrees lean to peak. What did I say? Yeah, peak EGT. So peak EGT. Everybody says no to lean of peak so far, right? So nobody has said that. Continental said, don't even lean if you're below 65% power. We need to remember that. We have 50 degrees rich of peak, and 100 degrees. So everybody is saying you must be flying on this side of the curve. You can either fly at peak, 50 degrees, or 100 degrees.
So when it says they don't want you to fly lean at peak, is that because the temperature's getting so high, or it might like stall out? So like, is that the reason right here? Or
No, it's saying best economy. Like Cummings says best economy. Go peak EGT. There's your best economy.
Okay.
And looking at the chart, it is best economy, isn't it?
But wouldn't that be also? I mean, the cylinder head temp is pretty high, so wouldn't that cause your detonation there?
Yeah.
You're risking it, but you're not risking it. The reason why you're not risking it is because you're below 75% power. Remember, you can never lean you're never supposed to lean at max power. Continental says don't even do it until you're 65%. So you're getting yourself out of that danger box because the power setting is low.
Okay, so the second red line is rich of peak. So where would be your is that black line right next to it like your 75% maybe? Or
percent power? Yeah, here's percent power.
Okay.
Well, no, I got to back up. So this is giving me, this is where we get back into there's two different percent powers. One is the settings that the pilot has done, and another one is what the engine's actually giving you per the specific fuel consumption, per the mixture.
Okay.
So this entire chart is going to be set up, number one, that you set the engine for 75% power. By that, I mean the throttle. You set the throttle for 75% power. Got it?
Yep.
Okay. if you lean it perfectly at that 75% power, you're going to be here. If you're enriching it, you're going to fall off to what was available in that power. And if you really lean it, it's going to go that way in power without touching the black knob. Follow?
Yes.
Okay.
So
So I
for
know
that
it's really kind of hard
graph-
because it's like two different powers. It's like, well, wait a minute. So one you set with the black knob, the other one we're messing with the red knob. So we've already set it with the black knob and set it and forget it with the black knob. Now we're just messing with the red knob, and this is what happens with the red knob.
So in
It-
best economy range, you don't have a ton of power.
No, your power falls off quite a bit. But look at, we're at 95% of the available power at 75% power. So I guess another way to look at it is we could use some.
A percentage of the percentage.
Exactly. So, I've got my Continental, it's got a 100 horsepower engine. And so I set it for, was it 26 RPM, which was 75% power at 5,000 feet. So I look over and I pull my black knob and I do that. But if I'm right here in this spot, right here at the 100%, then I'm getting my 75 horsepower. But if I come over to here and it drops down to here, that's only 95% because I've pushed the red knob in too far.
I think it's
So
like
that's
71.
75 times 95%. So that's 71 horsepower right here. Because I hope you guys can follow that.
I have a kind of a question. I know you can buy stuff like from Sporties and whatnot that are like charts like this that you can use while flying, but they're not made by the manufacturer. They're made by like private people to like where they have determined for that kind of aircraft where it gets the best performance and fuel burn per hour. But like when you're looking at this, how are they different than the stuff that like you're reading from the manufacturer? How do they determine that their ratio of if you're going to be 50 degrees rich of peak or 50 degrees lean of peak, how do they get their ratio basically?
Oh, they probably have a test engine and set up a fully operational, fully monitored engine and figured it all out. Dynoed it, put it on a brake, it's not that hard. Okay. So the thing I want to point out right now is, again, all operations, according to everything we've read, must happen from peak EGT on down. This is the area that you're allowed to operate. That's it. That's according to Cessna and Lycoming, that's your area of operation. They're telling you that it's okay to run over here and at peak. And I'm showing you right now what happens if you run at peak, because I want you to know this. You run at peak, you're going to burn up some exhaust valves. Okay, you run 50 degrees rich. How is that looking for cylinder head temps? Damn near the worst space damn near the worst space you could possibly be for a cylinder head temp. It does not want to be there. Okay, what about 100 degrees rich at peak?
Good. Too cool.
No, it's fine.
Perfect.
Down here, what else am I getting?
Good power.
Max power.
Max power.
Max power. It's running cooler. Okay, so again, this is about saving fuel. Do you want to save fuel? And because every time I lean it, I'm going to save fuel. Do you want to save fuel and heat up those cylinders, or do you want to or use more gas and eat more power? So
it's like a double-edged sword, pretty much.
Yeah. Do you want to burn gas? Or you want to burn cylinders?
At what point on that chart are you gonna run into detonation? Is that at the 50 degrees of rich of peak?
Okay. In theory, because this is not 100% power, I've already set my throttle and my propeller combination so that I'm at 75% or less, 65 for Continental. You're allowed to do all of this without detonation.
Oh, okay.
In theory. So
Hey, Kevin.
other books kind of say you got to be careful with this. But all right, let's see what I said. So leaning a Lycoming from the operators, maintain. So you always want to maintain full rich during a climb out, unless you're at a high altitude airport. Max cruise power, let me see, approximately 75% power. Never lean beyond 150 degrees on the rich side of peak, according to this. So that's 100, that's gonna be what, about in here? Let's actually follow this down, so 150 degrees, that's somewhere in here. So never, and why would you? You're losing power, so why keep richening it? You're just gonna keep losing power. Best economy cruise, operate at peak EGT. Oh yeah, we already did all that, okay. Let me see.
Hector, your mic is like being weird.
That's Hector. There. All right. So EGT peaks near the leanest mixture. Let me see. I'll write this over here so that we can actually see it. If I get my pen to come up. So pen. Oops. Let's go eraser. We'll get rid of all this. And these are some good notes to write right here. So, yeah, really, Steve?
What?
The yawn?
That wasn't me.
Okay. Sorry, I'm boring you. All right. So EGT.
Whoa, you're not boring. You're greatly educating me.
EGT peaks near leanest mix. Leanest mixed, or the lowest. It's also the lowest specific fuel consumption. So if we look at that, EGT is peaking near lowest specific fuel consumption. Well, how about that? That's why it's the economy range, and it also EGT peaks near there. That is between 50 degrees. Yeah, Lena peak and ROP. And what I'm saying right there is the specific fuel consumption. It's pretty low right in this little range right here. Really starts taking off after that. CHT is highest at about 25 degrees, rich of peak. 50 degrees, lean of peak. Oop, I'm saying a bad word, is best economy. With low CHT. Is that true? 50 degrees lean of peak. Oh, look at my CHT down here.
Yeah.
That is way down here. My percent power fell off too, but it's what, at 92%? And my specific fuel consumption, hey, not too bad. Which is, again, it's a ratio between power and the amount of fuel using. But low power, we'll put that. But low power. Got low power. And 50 degrees, rich of peak. Rich of peak uses more fuel. Uses more fuel. Has higher CHT, but close to max power, which is better speeds. I'm not going to get into this next part, but it is kind of interesting. So I'll just tell you, there used to, okay, so it's actually, my note says, well, let the controversy begin. And this is where this controversy gets in. And I'm telling you, I've seen pilots almost come to blows over this. There is an entire school of thought that says running lean of peak is perfectly acceptable and there's nothing wrong with it. And their basic assumption is cool is cool. Does it matter if you cooled the engine because you added gas or got it cool because you deprived it of gas? Cool is cool. And I'm going to agree with him. Cool is cool. And as long as you're not in the detonation zone, then it doesn't matter. And so given that, would you rather run 50 degrees rich of peak or 50 degrees lean of peak?
Rich of peak.
Well, rich of peak, look at where my cylinder head temp is.
That's true.
50 degrees lean of peak, look where my cylinder head temp is.
Color.
So
It's much lower. Now my exhaust gas temp is nearly the same, but because the cylinder is so much cooler, it can help absorb some of the heat out of the exhaust valve.
But fuel is cheaper than exhaust valve, so why wouldn't you just add more fuel?
Okay, so in order to get the same cylinder head temp, I've got to run it way over here, which is just it's just bad economy. So if this is the same as that, and there is no detriment, then the argument is just run lean of peak. There's nothing wrong with it. And to a large extent, I have to agree with them.
So
Aren't you
basically it
burning more
boils down
fuel?
to who you're talking to.
It depends on who you're talking to. And so this new, and what adds to this controversy is there is a method called the WAD method, W-A-D. I don't have my pen out. W-A-D. I don't even want to write it because you don't need to know it, but it was the W-A-D method, which stood for Right Aeronautical Division. And so in this little book I had, the SSP book right here, the new old leaning technique, Lycoming gets into it quite well and says, hey, we're not stupid. We understand this WAD method. Right Aeronautical Division, now you're talking about Wright engines. Wright engines were used during World War II. So we're going way back. And they had a pretty complicated method. And what they did is they would actually set the power. They would lean way on the lean side of peak. They would go to the lean side of peak, which you see you lost all this power.
Mm-hmm.
But then at that point, they would increase their manifold pressure, pushing the black knob until they regained the power, which is another way of going really freaking lean. And the thing is that the argument against that is, well, you can do that because back in those days, parts were cheap and labor was too. And you were also running through engines very quickly. A lot of these engines in World War II planes were being shot out of the air before they actually had a problem. So what did it matter? And what they were trying to do then was go very long distance with as little fuel as they had to complete their mission, or even the passenger airplanes were doing it. They were trying to go far and save fuel because fuel was kind of cheap. So anyway, so I don't want to get into the WAD method, but that was the whole thing. And so some places are assuming, like Lycoming ties this WAD method into this stuff, which really isn't an accurate thing to do. Let me see if I can. So I'm going to skip the WAD. I don't know why you did that, but okay. So escape, discard, back to here. All right. So let's do this. So I think this is some cool stuff. This is 5 way out to the side. So problems. So, all right, problems. Proponents of LOP operation. Assume, okay, so I kind of think what I've done is I probably, and hopefully a little bit, maybe convinced you that lean of peak isn't a bad thing. Hopefully, because my own personal opinion, it's not. What is a bad thing to me is running 50 degrees rich of peak, because that is about the worst spot for cylinder head temps. So proponents LP operation, operation A says you assume that you have, this is what the people who, proponents have equally matched fuel flow to each cylinder. Fuel flow to each. And that's probably not going to happen, especially if you have a carbureted engine, especially if you have a big 6-cylinder carbureted engine, because the fuel goes into one spot and you have to hope that it divides itself evenly in 6 exact ways. And if it doesn't, if a little more fuel goes to the right or to the left, then you're not going to have that happen. So let me pull this up. This is from GAMI. GAMI is one of the leading manufacturers that get into this. And you'll hear people with fuel injected engines have GAMI fuel injections. GAMI stands for General Aviation Modifications. And they're, in my opinion, really the leaders in a lot of this stuff. And this is a 6-cylinder Continental engine, and it's showing the spread. Each one of these lines is a different cylinder with different EGT. So one is way up here and one is way over here. So you have approximately 1.2 to 1.3 gallons per hour spread in these cylinders. They're not the same. So if you're trying to lean this cylinder up here and manage your engine by this cylinder is doing something completely different. So you do run into problems with all of this stuff. So, okay. So in reality, most engines have uneven fuel flow. Now, GAMI's awesome because their big thing is they make fuel nozzles that are matched to an engine to get that graph 100% flat, and they all look about the same, which is pretty cool. I also want to know that, okay, remember the leaning to roughness? I wrote that a bit ago. You lean till it's rough, and then you push it in a little bit. It was assumed, I'll put this, the roughness is often assumed to be lean cylinder misfire. In other words, because of this bad mixture, I'm looking at cylinder number 1, and cylinder number 6 is running really lean. And so as I'm leaning out number 6 to get it right where I want it, number 1 is so lean that it starts misfiring. Well, that's probably not true. It's because if we look at the curve of what's happening, let's bring it over like this. If we look at the curve back, what's happening as we are pulling the mixture out, it gets leaner, and then the whole engine dies, really. It doesn't really misfire. So they say that most likely, and I believe this, most likely, so it is more likely, this roughness, that is more likely caused by uneven horsepower. Uneven horsepower within each cylinder. Which is to say, one cylinder is running here, one is running here, and one is running here, or several are running here on one side and one is running over here. And that imbalance of firing is going to cause the engine to be a little rough. And when it's a little rough, it's going to feel like a misfire, but it's not. So Lycoming directly fights this theory in the New Old Leaning, that book, that fuel savings is not worth the loss of power. Let me see. Oops. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, fuel savings is not worth the loss of power. So just do it. They also say at 50 degrees, lean of peak and increased throttle, you're dangerously close to detonation, which you're not supposed. That was the that was the WAD method where you increase the throttle. So anyway, so that's the controversy, and that's the facts that I have for you. So questions on that? You guys are very quiet. I don't know.
Oh,
I feel pretty good.
It's all right.
Did I put you to sleep with this?
I just have to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just used to oversimplifying it. Just mixture in full rich when I'm below 5,000.
Okay, so what is our takeaway from this? You're working in the shop and somebody comes up to you and says, or you're doing an annual and you find out you did a compression check and you find out that it's got low compression and all this compression problem is coming out of the exhaust valve. So you got leaky exhaust valves. What are you going to do? What are you going to tell the customer?
That they're running a peak and that to save fuel. And
They're running at 50 degrees rich of peak.
Well, you've got, you see, do a borescope. Don't forget you do a borescope, and we've got valves with some green staining on them. Good or bad?
Bad.
Bad.
Green is always bad.
Green means stop, right?
You want
Yeah.
pizza?
So you have to call the customer and you're going to say, I've got really bad news for you. You got
burnt
six-cylinder
valves.
engine. You've got 4 burned exhaust valves.
Mhm.
Oh man, I fly this thing exactly like the pilot operating handbook, the POH. You know, what do you recommend I do? And then you think back and like, oh yeah, you should run 50 degrees rich of peak. That way you're not running at peak, it's 50 degrees. And you know what? A little bit of extra fuel, why it's going to clean out that little extra fuel is going to help cool that engine because fuel is cooling. I learned this from my textbook. And are you doing him any favors? Is pilot any favors?
Totally.
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm
Because
gonna run 50 degrees lean of peak.
well, you got to be careful with that. So you're going to say, well, I got a problem for you. If you're running around peak, you're doing the most possible damage to your exhaust valve and cylinder possible. And he says, well, I know. So I'm going to go 25 degrees rich of peak because that's going to be good for me, right?
No.
Gonna be
No,
hotter.
it's
Not
even
quite.
worse.
It's gonna be.
All right, you
It's
just
worse.
made it worse. You're better off going probably peak than anything else because at least your cylinder is going to be somewhat cool. Now you've just increased your cylinder head temp, which is even worse. All right, so he says, okay, then how about 50 degrees rich of peak, just like the manual says? And you're going to say, well, you've cooled your exhaust a little bit more, but really your cylinder head temp is still way too hot. Better, if that's your concern, to run 100 degrees
Yeah.
rich of peak. And guess what your benefit is going to be?
Best power.
Cool everything.
Power,
You're cool and you're getting best power,
but you're
Mhm.
burning more fuel.
but you're burning more fuel. Well, let's think about that. Fuel is about $5 a gallon. How much does it cost to replace
But
six or five exhaust valves? Well, each exhaust valve is going to run you at least 250 plus the labor to tear your engine apart, plus the risk that the person who's doing it's not going to wet torque everything and you're going to start losing your studs and you're going to have fretting in your case. So best to run just a little bit more fuel. Now, owner operator comes in and said, look, I'm hearing some stuff out there about running lean of peak. What's your opinion on that? And now when I say it, I say, I'm absolutely for lean of peak. Just know what you're doing and don't do the WOD method where you're increasing the throttle afterwards to regain power. So lean of peak is great. And you can show them a chart like this. Hey, you're going to get 50 degrees lean of peak. You're going to get that cylinder head temp down. You're going to get that exhaust gas temp. It's coming down a little bit, but you know what? Look at that chart. I think I'd rather run right here. I get my power. I have cool cylinders and specific fuel consumption. Hey, it's still down here on the low end of stuff. Maybe it's not over here, but it's over here. So, hey, it's what you want to do. Things change. I'm flying a Cessna 150. I'm burning 5.8 gallons per hour. Let's talk to somebody who's flying a Cessna 310 who's burning a whole lot more. So, I don't know. Harry, what's your fuel burn per hour?
It varies, but I run that thing. I'm normally just putting around even when I'm going places, so I don't run it that hard. So I'm doing like 11 or 12 gallons an hour.
Okay. So now we put Cessna 310 has got 2 of those engines. So that's 24 gallons per hour and things start to add up. So I know what time it is, Zach, but thank you.
So,
all right, so let's have a dinner break and I will see you guys back here at
1 o'clock.
7.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.